Brown, queer, and high, cut back, locked up, sent to die. Part number 2. We have 16 more pages. Let me just read this because it might be 3 minutes a page about, so it might be 50 minutes of just reading and then I'll talk a little bit if I have time. Chapter 1, Why? The things there to do are the things that need doing, the things that you see need to be done, and that the things to do are the things that need doing, the things that you see need to be done, and that no one else seems to see need to be done. That's Buckmaster Fuller. He's a smart guy. Not all these, he was like Elon Musk. He's a really smart guy, but not all of his ideas were great, so you don't want to worship the crazy intellects, but he was a crazy intellect, a very smart guy. Why? The inspiration, the moment when I first realized what I had to do, I was stoned, and possibly naked, draped across two candy cane pattern comfy chairs in our new Berkeley apartment. It came to me while I was transferring data from the California Department of Motor Vehicles website to a depository that was to become the lead source for my future commercial insurance agency. So I haven't read this in like 8 years, seriously. I read the beginnings of some of this stuff, but I hadn't had time until now. That's why I'm dedicating these videos to actually think about my life the whole time. And then I'm going to do this section. I'm going to think about like all 35, 36 girls I've been with and then some of the crushes and the people that I fucking made a fool of myself in front of. We're going to do this a couple different ways of looking at my life. But yeah, this is interesting. When I was transferring data from the California Department of Motor Vehicle website to a depository that was to become the lead source for my future commercial insurance agency, suddenly I saw my destiny as clearly as the Excel spreadsheet in front of me, overflowing with MCP numbers and X dates. I have to run for the governor of California. It was coming up on Thanksgiving 2009, and I had been at the task since my girlfriend and I had moved in 3 weeks ago. I had probably logged over 100 hours of mind-numbing work. The home office was well underway in our living room, with business cards and phone fax lines resting on an antique school desk placed in the corner. Behind the desk, in the closet, a printer and filing cabinet waited for the official launch. Across the hardwood floors and next to the bay windows stood a $75 upright piano from down the street. I thought we got it for free. See how your mind plays tricks on you? We actually paid for that piano. Nothing to do with insurance, but everything to do with the perks of working from home. And I was in the process of shopping for my E&O. I already had some warm prospects. That's errors and omissions. That's the insurance you have to have as a business owner to sell insurance. I should have gotten it for real estate. I never really got a policy for real estate, but I was supposed to. I already had some warm prospects, and yet at the very moment, I suspected that I would never sell another insurance policy for as long as I lived. I was going to run for the governor of California. So you can see like 8 years later, I had the same crisis of consciousness. Only this one, I've given myself the year to work through. I guess after working in real estate, I realized that maybe my timeline's like, I'm good at executing, and maybe some of these crazy ideas just need a longer timeline. So that's why when I thought the presidential thing, I was like, 2020, a 3-year plan, I think I could do it in 3 years. Let me spend this whole year just thinking about it. So that's what this year is about. I'm pretty sure I'm doing it. It's almost the end of the year. I still have like a month and a couple days to decide. Some of you might have been expecting a stoner story based on the title. But for those who can relate, know that there are stony ideas, and then there's stony ideas. I'll go into further detail on my thoughts on the tone has shifted once I switched to autobiographical. Earlier writing was pretty tight, and then this is narrative, which is cool. It's just different. I'll go into further detail on my thoughts on marijuana in the appropriate chapter, but suffice it to say, sometimes all you need is that different perspective. I had just spent 3 weeks sitting around our apartment watching movies while building a database of thousands of numbers that would, hopefully, more affirmative language, Shaz, not hopefully, you were going to succeed, translate into sales that would then, even more hopefully, Shaz, what did I just tell you? Edit the hopeful out of your language. That looks so cool, right? even more hopefully, translate into a growing business and a future. Admittedly, I've neglected responsibility for the better part of my working years. Never see the insecurity is dripping out of this. Never staying at any one job long enough to achieve a comfortable sense of stability. But this was my opportunity to make good on my career. Yeah, what's your opportunity to copy edit? That doesn't make sense. What the perfect girl stolen from Brooklyn and a cute little place on a tree-lined street in the East Bay, things seemed to be falling into place. But then I discovered that I'm supposed to run for the governor of California. So I stopped all my big plans. Shaw quits her job. I have her name everywhere in this thing. We liquidate our furniture and find replacement tenants for our landlord. I make a rough itinerary of California, north to south, and we hit the road for the first week of January, headed for Crescent City armed with a laptop, a nascent website, and a smartphone. I relate the above story to set a certain tone. If you read the preface and introduction, you might pick up on a pleading sense of sincerity. This isn't meant to be to endear myself to the reader, but rather point the way. Writing is a funny exercise where it seems the brain serves as a poor translator for the heart. Writing that's worth a damn anyways. I'm reading this for the first time, same as you. No, now this is like multiple times afterwards, I guess. We're kind of partners in a discussion, not on opposing sides, but rather on the same side, trying to coax wisdom out of that coquettish human heart. So this is like too removed. I think I could afford to just skip right into it, but being the first stuff that I'm writing, one of the first things I'm writing on my own, it's like, yeah, I think Complete American's Guide to Revolution. So you write this way so that way you could write different next time. So next time I got more to it, and hopefully this, what I do now will just be, yeah, even every time you feel less of a need to explain yourself, probably. I heard that somewhere. It's like as you get older, you feel less of a need to explain yourself and just do what you feel you should be doing. So, yeah, this is me looking at my feet while I dance. I'll try to ask the relevant questions for us and represent our side the best I can. But that heart, I hear she's a tricky one. Oh, you coy Shaz, you. I do not want this book experiment to be a diary, but at the same time, I do not want it to be personal because I am a person, as I expect you to be. But at the same time, I do want it to be personal because I am a person, as I expect you to be. A person who believes things, a person with a heart of their own. I'm running as a writing candidate for the position of governor of California because that is a thing that needs doing, and I see it needs to be done, and no one else seems to be doing it. So I guess this was early enough. I was thinking, all right, if I finish this book, I could get that candidacy still out if I get this coalition together. I was like seeing my window dwindle. It's like March maybe, and the elections in like that September, like 6 months out. I was probably thinking, all right, 6 months, grassroots writing candidacy. I don't know. I have never suffered from a belief in myself, however delusional. A friend of mine in Puerto Rico, she called me Delusional Dave, double D, because I'd be like, no, that girl's into me. She was like, what? And some of the girls I got. So she had to like respect the game a little bit. But I thought I could get anyone. And no matter how good you are, there's just some girls who just do not want what you're selling. So I'd always be like, no, that girl's into me. And she's like, you're so fucking delusional. But yeah, I need to hit her up too. She's in Florida now. She has a baby. But yeah, but some of the girls that she thought was delusional about came around. So I know that I'm capable. But like, yeah, so like, but this was, I guess, looking back on it, we'd have to objectively call it delusional. Is really running for president now delusional? Everyone seems to think so, but let's see how 2019 works out. There's steps to this shit. And what I know is these things there's good art that comes out of this shit too, so, but we'll see. And that's also why the party idea is such a good idea, because it's more about the party, and I'm just the minimal viable product. I'm the MVP, as you would say in startup speak. So I'm just, if we could get a better candidate than me, let's have debates, let's do something. But it's more about the process, and that's how you combat systemic corruption and injustice. If you make it about a person or one person's ego, then this is a very small discussion. But if we make it about proving a new example, a way to do things outside the status quo, then now we have a revolutionary concept possibly. The plan. I've discovered that the best question you can ask in life is why. This not only applies to others, but to yourself. Why are you reading this book? Or maybe more appropriately, why did I decide to write it? Well, the plan was to see just how far a person can get speaking the truth as they see it. You see, I always assumed that I would sell insurance as a career and write on the side. Sayings become cliched for a reason, and don't quit your day job is no exception. But then for 3 busy weeks, work occupied my time without taxing a corresponding amount of mental energies, and I found my mind wandering dangerously close to idealism. Living in Berkeley can do that for you, of course. Maybe it was a documentary of Granny D. Was it Granny D? I thought it might be Granny G. That put me over the edge. Perhaps the idea first started forming as I watched this frail, old, beautiful woman in her 90s try to run for state senate against a heavily favored incumbent. She ran for state senate. I thought she just did that walk. Something intrigued me about the idea of a person speaking truth to power, simple and unadorned. She lost, of course, but then I'm younger with more ideas and energy. And I have a brilliant mustache. Oh. A caterpillar gently sleeps asleep atop my upper lip. The truth first, I had to distill the truth, and then ride it all the way to Sacramento. So I set out to talk to people all across the state from north to south, stopping in every state assembly district and county seat to pick up the relevant pieces to this California jigsaw puzzle. I remember hearing a phrase while petitioning to get Ralph Nader on the ballot in 2008. Ralph said something to the effect that we're not drowning for lack of solutions, but lack of application. The more I learn about issues facing California, or the United States in general, the more I find myself coming back to that one saying. Experience reinforces that every problem has a solution, probably multiple ones, just waiting to be applied. My dictionary states something about wisdom being the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. It felt like I was onto something. Regardless of what you think about poor Ralph's judgment, or mine for that matter, you cannot argue against the need for a little bit more wisdom in our civic discourse. And that is exactly what I set out to capture, like a kid with a mason jar and an eye for fireflies. So you can see in my work, I'm borrowing on other works of myself. I'm alluding to other works. I'm alluding to Amnesty. That guy in that field, I described him as a kid in a field looking for bugs to fill jars. And Rafael Guillen is actually the name of Subcomandante Marcos, which is the guy who led the Zapatistas in southern Mexico and Chiapas. So little things in my life just to remind myself of stuff I've read, which I guess you get that if you know about the Zapatistas. And then I could just recognize that kid like a kid with a mason jar and an eye for fireflies. These images are like reoccurring images in my own head. I have this own canon now with my works, and like some of the other stuff that I read reference the speeches I later put into beats. And so these things that I used to heal me and remind myself of wisdom that I've gathered over my life, I've used and I refer back to, even subconsciously. So it's an interesting way to live. It's like I am not a public figure, but I digest my own material, which I think has helped inoculate me from a lot of the bullshit on the outside, which I like the person I am and the people I attract in my life by putting my spirit out there. So I think it's worth something now. And if it's not worth something in its current form, then I'll just repackage it. But there's something here. There's some wisdom here that I've sustained myself on. So I think we'll be able to monetize it and also use it to heal others. Wisdom seems linked with sincerity. And I would think leading with my heart would give me the best chance to land a jackpot. But if the heart speaks in code, she keeps her diary in disappearing ink, the lines coming in and out of focus based on circumstance. I went in search of sages and found very human people, all very heartfelt, all seemingly wise, and all in some way contradictory to each other, not to mention themselves. But then, as I went on, I began to understand that this is the point. Like a wild poet caterwauling down a slope with the epiphany that you can't fall off the mountain. That's the Dharma Bums. I read the Dharma Bums in Berkeley. I came to the realization that you can't fail in democracy. It's an organic, evolving process that by definition should adjust to the needs of the situation at hand. The original App Store. You've got a problem? We've got to vote for that. Let me repeat for those of you who skim. You can't fail at democracy. If you hold this tenet in mind, you will start to be able to actually address what ails our government. So if we can't fail at democracy, and it seems as though our government is in perpetual failure, where do we to conclude? The sad part is most people will beat me to the punch. We currently don't have a functioning democracy. So many people I talk to state this matter-of-factly, with more than a little bit of smugness. Some of them are being smarmy just to point out the semantic differences between a true democracy and a representative one, or a republic. That's for that cop friend in Northern California. But that's why I included it now, because out of all the people I talked to, the cop had the most constitutional wisdom. But for the cynical few, or rather the cynical majority, they are actually admitting that they had given up on any real form of self-governance. If the highest measure of democracy is neither the extent of freedom nor the extent of equality, but rather the highest measure of participation, then it seems like we've been missing the point. We've been missed the point. Where's your copy editor, Shaz? Purposefully. After all, in whose interest is it to have an enfeebled democracy? People think that it's a personal cynicism to be uninspired with politics, reminding me of the devil's greatest trick in convincing the world he doesn't exist. Actually, there are very powerful groups that have an active interest in keeping you as far away from politics as possible. They admitted as much a generation ago when they complained of the excess of democracy ushering in the progressive movements of the time. Those are real quotes. Who said that? Just Google that. Excess of democracy. No, I have to do that now. See, some of this shit I forgot. That's why I wrote all this shit. Shaz, remember this shit. It might be important in the future. Excess of democracy, quote. That was like the Trilateral Commission, I think. That was a Rockefeller dude on the Trilateral. If we incline too much to democracy, we'll shoot into a monarchy. That was Alexander Hamilton. Here we go. 1989. The evils flow from an excess of democracy. Where the fuck is this? How do you... I have an iPad and it's hard for me to search on the iPad. Find in page. Access. The evils we experience flow from the excess of democracy. The people do not want virtue, but are the dupes of pretended patriots. Eldridge Gerry Constitutional Convention. That's not the one I was looking for. Anyways, we're getting sidetracked. We have to finish this and we'll talk more. Ushering in, I think that was a meeting of the Trilateral Commission. We're going to try one more time. I fucking want that quote. Trilateral Committee. Access. Democracy. There's so much information. It's like I've spent a lifetime gathering shit that then I just store away and then keep trying to... The Crisis of Democracy on the Governability of Democracies was a 1975 report written by Michel Crozier, blah, 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 for the Trilateral Commission. In the same year, it was republished as a book. I should get that book. I should read it. That's very important shit. The report observed the political state of the United States, Europe, and Japan, saying that in the United States, the problems of governance stems from an excess of democracy, and thus advocates to restore the prestige and authority of central government institutions. The report serves as an important point of reference for studies focusing on contemporary crises in democracy. So it's like staring us right in the face. Yeah, I read that from Chomsky. Noam Chomsky has cited the report as an example of reactionary policies coming from the liberal wing of the state capitalist ruling elite. But it's just how you use these terms, especially Chomsky as a linguist. That confuses people. Liberal, right, left, blah, blah, blah. It's like, nah, dude, why don't you just say statist, institutionalist, or authoritarian? That is, anti-democracy has an antithetical word to it, authoritarian. We have publics governing themselves or governing themselves through representatives or direct democracy, either representative or direct, versus a single authority, authoritarianism, of which there are multiple forms. There's fascists, there's dictators, there's kings, but all with central authorities. So we have a central power, and then we have diversified powers. We have pyramidal, hierarchical structures, and we have horizontal structures. I'm talking about horizontal structures in this, and I haven't even read David Graeber, and yet he says when he started Occupy Wall Street, yeah, they were trying to do some labor organizing, and we were like, let's give these guys a horizontal. These guys seem more horizontal. We'll get to that, but he's like, these guys seem more horizontal. They're young. They seem energetic. They're not going to vibe with this top-down shit. So he showed him and some other internationalists, international workers of the world or something, some international unions were over there just observing, and they showed people how to do a General Assembly. And I talked to one of the witnesses from that day. I'm going to put it into my writing then, but he was like, yeah, people went to the labor stuff, to the old order organizing, and then they went to the General Assembly, and people swung back and forth all day until they finally settled at the General Assembly, because it's a breath of fresh air, actual civic discussion, including everyone's participation. If you don't have these identity factions that break everything down into fucking black, white, stereotype, superficial shit. Actually just listening to each other and then having a dialogue. Consensus, when it works, there's no other communication you want to go back to, because everyone buys into the final outcome. If you've ever been in a meeting where you actually had a buy-in by the whole group by the end of it, it's like a fucking religious experience compared to a meeting where a top-down, heavy-handed CEO is trying to squeeze the agreement out of every single individual stakeholder. It's like fucking trench warfare right around the boardroom table, right? I mean, I don't know. Who's Shaz? Who are you talking to other than yourself? But it's funny. Excess. I'm glad I found that, because then I just screenshot the Trilateral Commission, and that's something that I should include in my writing now. All the shit you forget. That's why you need time and space to write. There's a lot of little things that fall through the cracks. Ushering in the progressive movements of the time. On the odd chance you are not dissuaded by their antics of lowering the political bar, they will do their best to muddle your aim, so that your efforts you are driven to fanaticism. Yeah, I think I didn't copy edit this. On the odd chance that you are not dissuaded by their antics of lowering the political bar, they will do their best to muddle your aim, so that your efforts are driven to fanaticism, while your true grievances are sublimated. Keep the sane ones away, and the crazies crazy. That's what happened to Occupy Wall Street. The cynical face of politics is a bureaucratic defense mechanism. In plain English, each election is your chance to throw the bums out, and they know it, dread it even. And that's just on the voter side. On the legislative side of things, there is enough sludge to stop even the most bright-eyed and bushy-tailed newbie politician dead in his tracks. Remember, it's not personal. These politicians are not villains. They're just mediocre civil servants in a broken democratic system that is assaulted on either end by special interests, read the haves of society. As I spoke with an assemblyman's aide in the state capitol building, he balked at the idea of limiting lobbyist influence. We can't function without them. They do most of the heavy lifting. Our democracy has been outsourced to the jackals. So that really bugged me. That was like a formative experience, and I put it into 2 works now. So all the stuff that came out of that California trip was more important probably than any book I read before or since. Because the books I read before I put into practice and then found wisdom that coincided with real life. And since, I haven't forgot that experiential wisdom is an important thing in life. That's when the wheels really clicked in my head. Yes, before I had been inspired for whatever reason to follow this governor idea down the rabbit hole for better or for worse. But now I realized I might just be right. A requisite to be a good politician is not having all the answers. In fact, ideologies are anathema to a well-oiled democracy. You're not a real writer until you've shoehorned the word anathema into one of your works. And I think I just did. The most important thing is just to get the system moving again. And what better way than a truly independent, grassroots, documented audit? Look under the hood and diagnose the real problem. We can YouTube to fame the next pop superstar. Why can't we YouTube to office the next political reformer? Where's the innovation? Where's the Bieber of politics? Do I really want to know? A cranky racist and often brilliant philosopher once proclaimed that democratic institutions form a system of quarantine for tyrannical desires. I'm not ready to concede the point entirely, because I still have enough idealism to believe that injustice requires an anemic democracy. All we have to do is bolster our democracy, the equivalent of a B12 shot to the democratic buttocks. New media? Check. Intelligence? Check. Ideals? Check. Poverty? Double check. Looks like I should be the clear front runner. So who was that guy? Cranky racist and often brilliant philosopher. Once proclaimed that democratic institutions form cranky. Maybe that was Nietzsche? Something. Oh yeah, those other guys are running too. This will serve, look, I don't even have, so yeah, I'm seeing my writing style. Now I'm getting into stuff I didn't even read enough to capitalize. So this is going to be just, I guess, like, I would just write, just feeling it flow, and then go back and put in more grammar and punctuation, and then go back and copy edit. So that last stuff wasn't even copy edited, and then this stuff I'm losing punctuation. So Shaz is unraveling. So you're seeing the more and more raw version of Shaz. So be careful. Things might get sticky. Oh yeah, those other guys are running too. This will serve as a you know what the stickiest is those notes from about the Iraq War. That was just raw notes. There was a lot of stuff that just evolved into a collection of quotes by the end of it. But that's me probably at my loosest, just random stuff. Oh yeah, those other guys are running too. This will serve as a true test. Can we remove most, if not all, of our legislators and their corrupt apparatus without violence? If so, we will have to establish that democracy is indeed alive in the U.S., and if not, at least we will have established an admitted identity for the type of government we do have. The problems are not too complicated, or as complicated as given social narratives would have you believe. 1. Concentrated power tends to protect its interest and increase its dominance in society. 2. Our economy functions to concentrate power by concentrating wealth. All you have to do is stand up for people over profits. You can start at either end by identifying the black holes of wealth, whose gravity affect us all, or you can start by seeking out the victims who have been abused by our violent society. But we should all end up at the same goal, a reaffirmation of human dignity. So that's good. I'm being angry, but we're keeping human dignity at the front. Open with statement. Now these are just notes. Let's see how many notes I have. And then I probably have the notes and then rants in here. Open with statement. So I'm running for governor, and then explain the categories as the election blocks that are going to put me in the office. The two parties have turned politics into a game that they've perfected, but contrary to their hype, this isn't the only game in town. We don't have to play this game. Bring up Whitman campaign quote regarding failed blog apology, their silly rhetoric, then Jerry Brown's Goebbels comment. The level of discourse is insulting. What is Jerry Brown's Goebbels comment? Let's look that up. I forget about the things that upset me. There's too many things that upset me. Goebbels. Oh, Shaz. You know, by the time she's done with me 2 months from now, I'll be child molesting. She'll have her people believing whatever she wants about me. It's like Goebbels, Brown said, comparing Whitman with the Minister of Propaganda in Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. Goebbels invented this kind of propaganda. He took control of the whole world. She wants to be president. That's her ambition. The first woman president. That's what this is all about. I don't know. Was that true? It might have been true. Fucking these people. That's what it's ego. It's like, I try not to be a hypocrite. And so, like, I recognize a lot of ego in these people. But then also, I have to recognize it myself. I might be cut from the similar cloth. So let me have a good practice of lowering my ego. So when I ask other people to lower theirs, I'm already right there with them. If I err, tell me but where. If I'm taking, that's also good leadership. Don't ask things of your troops you wouldn't do yourself. Um, their level of discourse is insulting. Jerry made it clear he was running, and so clear the primaries unopposed. Whitman, yeah, I was mad at the Democratic side. It was just like, this is the power dynamics is so fucking ridiculous. Whitman spent enough to shout down rivals. They're doing a disservice to democracy by squelching dissent voices. We're running into unprecedented troubled times. You think we would have an open call for bright ideas. Instead, we have old school political games. Jerry's family is the CA institution. Whitman is old East Coast money married with old Pete Wilson policy, her advisor. It's insulting the voters. But that's the purpose of parties, to ensure current power systems survive the most vulnerable times, election cycles. Pelosi, now we have Pelosi at the top again. These fucking people haven't... A small window of opportunity where average citizens can actually do something. Not to be given something, but demand the future 4 years they want. Miscellaneous chapter, explain economic violence patterns. We acknowledge predatory lending in neighborhoods for generations. Brief summary. Predatory lending international, World Bank, forgiven debt, now pre-lending in communities. Flood markets with liquidity and then pull the purse strings. That's the capital flight. That's a pattern that Chomsky brings up too. We aren't discussing this. Lenders going after the crown jewels, privatization of community resources. Indiana privatizing their toll roads, leasing to Saudi Arabia company. Really? Let's look that up. Indiana. See, look at all this cool little shit I was fucking researching. Indiana, Saudi Arabia, lease toll roads. That's what we become a banana republic when we're fucking gutting out our infrastructure and selling it to fucking dictatorships? Come on. Pay toll ahead. Privatizing infrastructure comes with a trade-off. And then who's brokering this? The Goldman Sachs guys, who always have a seat at the table in every administration. The Trump administration promises to solve the crisis of public infrastructure by attracting large amounts of private money to bail us out. The Midwest, and Chicago in particular, have some experience with infrastructure privatization. Not all of it good. So perhaps we can use that experience to help ourselves and others. Let's look for the good news. There's a lot of private money around the world looking for solid investments. Investors are not just looking for the next killer app, but for investments that pay consistent returns over many decades. Think busy toll roads and bridges. During President Donald Trump's recent visit to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia committed $20 billion to a new Blackstone infrastructure fund. Oh, wow. So people like Blackstone broker out fucking municipality stuff. And you don't... Shaz, this is for you to remember for the future. But the private equity management funds in the United States would happily broker out our municipal treasures, and now there might be a disincentive where the bond market, the muni bond market, wants these guys to go further in debt, just like you would increase someone's credit card limits, not hoping that they default, but we want to get them more and more in debt. We want more and more of their disposable income on a personal consumer level. So why wouldn't we want it on a municipal bond level? And now if they do default, now we get to get one of these treasures, which is one of their public utilities or their public roads. Now we get to privatize those. And then we sell those off to private equity around the world, like foreign countries, even though the countries happen to be dictatorships. It's fucking... That is a spicy meatball. That is interesting. There's so much shit that we should be talking about, right? You haven't figured it out by now. There's connections between the problems in the world, and you're watching so much TV, buying so much useless shit, even voting for the same two fuckers every election. That's probably emotions I needed to unpack. Corporation as an institution is a vehicle to separate action from consequence, diffuse responsibility, what they term liability, responsibility, what they call liability. Reference gold ounce being able to be stretched a football field, so malleable. Oh, an ounce of gold, you can stretch it over a football field. We stretched our ability so thin as so everyone has a part and you can't hold them accountable. Oh, so that was like a cool metaphor. You can stretch gold an ounce over a football field, and you can stretch the liability of a corporation beyond personal accountability. I think that's my writing style. I seem to come up with really unique, cool images and metaphors. The same way that those kids at NYU are trying to create alternatives to Facebook, we needed alt politicians. Look at the corrupt system and provide alts. Oh, they were? That's interesting. They've been trying to create an alternative Facebook ever since people found out that Zuckerberg was didn't have the right values to lead an internet company. I explained my timeline to run as a writing candidate for governor. If this seems too ambitious, bring up walking door to door with Mark Levine. He's a nice guy and all, but I'm a deeper thinker. He handed me that brochure saying, I don't have time to read. That's basically like saying, I don't have time to think, which should be your first priority as an elected official or leader. We have too many lazy thinkers accepting faulted assumptions. I need to beat Whitman Brown, or at least attempt to speak truth to power. When did I write this? Because I thought I wrote this after I did that. No, I did. I thought I wrote this before I did that. So when I went out to visit Shaw, when I went to back to New York, and I had those two girls who were selling their panties online, and nothing happened of it. It was a sexy story with no punchline. But they're cool. If I had a Facebook, I would have connected with them. I didn't. I think one of my friends was friends with them, so I could find them through one of my friends' Facebooks. And I think I have a video of them. But not a sexy video. We were at a Wendy's. But then when I went to New York, I worked for Mark Levine's campaign. He was running for the state assembly in New York because they said that Cuomo was going to run for governor and vacate his assembly seat. And so Levine was going to go into his assembly seat. The fix was in from the beginning. These guys are so cynical. It's like he didn't think he was going to win, but this was setting him up for another thing down the line. Like, these guys think multiple elections out. Run for this, even if you're not going to win, and then you're going to be set up for this. And then it's like the worst form of fucking cronyism, nepotism, and that's what you're seeing with Pelosi. She's like, no, you're not going to unseat the queen bitch. I'm the queen bitch still. I run this shit. It's so not about representing your constituents or what the right thing to do is, and so more about just power dynamics. And they might think that's how the real world works, but not in healthy industries. Healthy industries operate through market mechanisms. The political industry has been insulated from market mechanisms because of these moats, artificial moats they've built. So we're just going to break open these moats. I still feel that way. But yeah, Mark Levine didn't fucking impress me. He was a fucking cynical ass. But the lead of his campaign was this Jewish girl with big boobs, and big boobs. How can you say that not sounding like an idiot? But she had very massive tracts of land, and she said, she asked me if I was of the tribe. I've never had that said before. You of the tribe? What do you mean? You Jewish? I was like, nah. I was like, fuck, I just ruined it. Maybe she was into me. And then I think on my way out, I asked her, like, I quit, but I asked her, you want to go grab a drink, do something? I was like, nope, no, I ain't of the tribe. I should have fucking shaz. But, yeah. But later on, I only had that. No, was I with another Jewish girl? I think so. But before Shah, I was with a Jewish girl. Does that matter? Is it a race or is it a culture or is it both? That's such a weird topic. It's like Jewish culture and people of the tribe love to talk about it. But I feel like when I talk about it, like talking about maybe black culture, not even black culture, I don't feel that self-conscious. But I feel like it's dangerous to talk too much about Jewish culture. It's like, I don't know. Anyways. Moral indignation is the word of the day. The supporting cast announced the citizens' audit. As much as there still exists a kind of thing we can label common sense, I'll try to appeal to what seems reasonable to the average person. The world is complicated enough, and my goal isn't to complicate it even more with another opinionated political book. My first priority is to simplify, cut through all the BS, and try to be rational. In a world where the solutions to our problems are so abundant, you have to try very hard to avoid improving your situation. Small, clear steps should see us through this mess in 100 pages or so, and then we both can go spend our energies on something more productive. In the intro, talk about wisdom, application of knowledge we already possess. Hold on, I think I'm lost. Okay. A couple quick common sense examples to save you the trouble of reading this book. I know it's only 100 pages, 30K words or so, but I don't want to waste your time, so below are a couple true or false questions for each group I'm going to talk about. I throw in a couple curveballs as well, just to keep it interesting. Brown. True or false? Society would be better off without immigrants. True or false? Undocumented immigrants usually could have come here legally. True or false? A person should be judged based on the location of his or her birth. Queer. True or false? Society would be better off without homosexuals. True or false? Gay people can be straight if they want, or vice versa. Everyone's gay. True or false? A person should be judged based off of their sexual orientation. High. True or false? Society would be better off without recreational drugs. True or false? The best way to treat an addict is by criminalizing their habit. True or false? A person should be judged based on their drug history. Cutback. True or false? America is so great because of our public education. True or false? The best way to provide public education is to privatize it. True or false? A person deserves to go to college. A person deserves to go to the college they can afford. Locked up. True or false? America is so great because we have the most people in jail. True or false? The best way to reform a criminal is to punish him. True or false? A prisoner doesn't deserve any rights. Sent to die. True or false? America is so great because we spend the most on our military. True or false? The best way to promote peace is to wage war. True or false? A soldier should still follow orders even if his commanders lie to him. Miscellaneous. True or false? Our government always acts in the interest of its common citizens. True or false? The WTC towers looked like they came down by controlled demolitions. True or false? You should believe everything that you hear, or conversely, nothing that you hear. Flash politics. True or false? Politics are boring, or stupid, or pointless, or hopelessly corrupt. True or false? An entrenched political class is the most efficient way to run a society. True or false? A person cannot do anything in politics without a lot of money. Personal. True or false? You have never felt threatened by people who are different than you. True or false? You have never had a homosexual thought. True or false? You have never tried an illegal substance. So that was interesting. That aligns a lot with like the authoritarians, the book that I read about authoritarians. He's a psychologist. So actually, I was in that testing experimentation mind state too. A lot of the stuff I'm doing this year is tying back to the stuff. That's why I felt like I had to do this. I was like, these are my formative years and assumptions anyways. I'm probably acting the stuff out. Let me just go back to the language of my belief systems. And I forgot about this guy. I forgot about this questionnaire. The language of empire. In place of the propaganda culture war foisted on us by the state, in which freedom of individuals, a Republican red state ideal of liberty, is pitted against social needs of groups, the Democrat blue state ideal of equality, we should substitute the real war between the corporate total state and the mass on which it feeds on one hand, and the community and individuals of the limited republic on the other, in both red and blue states. Therefore, the real struggle is between corporate interests and the mass culture they propagate, and the rights and values of the individuals and the communities to which they belong. I mentioned in the preface that the party structure's fatal flaw is a subservience of values to hierarchy. Go on. Bring up in intro CA blurb. It's all essentially the same question. Whether I deal with it from a macro or micro perspective, national or state, or even municipality lens. The question is how to make the world better, or at least that's a human question, which differs from our cultural narrative ingrained in us of how to enrich ourselves at all costs, or mindlessly serve another. One is in human competition. They call it the rat race, dog eat dog, etc. for a reason. Mankind isn't supposed to cannibalize itself. Mankind, not man mean. Mankind, not man mean. That's funny. That would make a good merch idea. Get it? Mankind, kind versus mean. Man mean. The other is slavery. I'm going to use that line. It's called mankind. Be kind to each other. It's called mankind, not man meanness. The other is slavery. You can either strive to be a master or consign yourself to be a Slav. I think I meant slave. I don't think I was using an ethnic slur. Winners and losers. But the third way is cooperation. I'm as strong as the weakest link, as rich as my poorest brother. And this leads us to the only important question, how to make the world better. And I could start the discussion with my 6 points and end up with the same pinnacle as the artist talking about aesthetics. There's only one human conversation, different paths up the same mountain. I use that example a bunch. There's only one obstacle, concentrated power trying to maintain and increase its dominance You can't eliminate evil. You can recognize it, guard against it, and minimize its effects. But in order to do that, you must try to move higher up that mountain to gain a better perspective. Indian values. If one could be of use to his people, highest honor. Contrast this with the symbolism of the country and the flag. We put objects in front of human values. So yeah, I was looking for like non-Western culture concepts. In each one of the chapters, reference either short story or poetry in search for that humanistic wisdom which we hide in our art. And then you see this in Complete American's Guide to the Revolution. I have a lot of artists and a lot of references that I pulled out. Explain an intro chapter that my desire is to be a great writer and that the medium is where my strength lies. I'm trying to write this book as a sense of responsibility, but the approach will rely heavily on people's stories, searching for accessible common sense wisdom. My collecting signatures for Nader, emails to Dude in Crescent City and Noam Chomsky. I should look up my emails of Noam Chomsky. After this, the next video, I'll look those up. Bring up the maps in the appendix. Actually, I won't, but I will eventually. I'll use them for something, but I'm not going to use them now. I posed the question of why I was writing this book earlier, but never directly answered it. Specifically, I hope that this book is an organizational tool. First and foremost, I hope to use it to raise money and continue my tour of California. But I'd also be happy if it just inspired someone out there to take action and try to align their lifestyles with their values. Perhaps it's a young guy or girl out there settling down to a safe career after a rocky youth spent chasing heroes. Perhaps it's myself. And maybe I can inspire them to postpone the settling just a little bit more. Granny's gone. Nader's not getting any younger. It seems our heroes are disappearing from our skies. Come help me and let's get this politics mess out of the way so we can get on to the real living. Sube a nacer conmigo, hermano. That's rise and be born with me, brother. Last note. I think that's a Pablo Neruda poem on the heights of Machu Picchu. Last note. You don't have to actually vote for me. Voting blocks are what my comments in the intro are all about. Right now, we don't have a vehicle for effectively organizing human interests in large voting blocks. A strong independent voting bloc tempts the other candidates to co-opt their issues, which is how we abolished slavery and gave women the right to vote. These are all very important issues that people are currently getting shafted on. You don't have to win office to win your campaign, just like you don't have to be a politician to run, but God help me if I win. So I guess I was running to fail, and that's what I don't agree with. But a note on the Chaz Barbaric. I'm taking this project public. This is my initial public offering of sorts. What is a corporation? It's a vehicle to aggregate resources, but in a peculiar way. The main purpose is to limit the liability, read responsibility of its agents. If we're too litigious a society, shouldn't we push for tort reform rather than tort protection? Because then it's just a slippery slope, isn't it? When I began selling commercial liability insurance, 1 millimeter was the standard for a small business owner. Now 2 millimeter is becoming more common. When I worked for State Farm, the going common wisdom was that a home was naked without a 1 millimeter umbrella policy to protect its assets, not to mention his liability, especially if he had a family. What I'm trying to say is there should be more reasonable solutions to these issues. And about aggregating resources, I guess this is kind of like the anti-corruption. This is kind of like the anti-corporation. I'm asking for resources but promising more responsibility. But the tool is the same in regards to a force multiplier. I'm only as strong as my shares, and that depends on you, the reading public. I don't expect to be the next literary Google. But maybe if you stick with me for the next couple of chapters, I'll be able to convince you that I'm worth a small investment. This is like Shaz begging for tuppence. Tuppence for the poor, please. Tuppence. 2 pence for the poor. I read quite a bit, whether smart people like to read or bookworms like to think they're smart. I can't tell you. As you might have noticed, I try not to reference a source unless I have to. I figure we're all in this together, and a clever maxim, like a sneeze, can shoot out of anyone if their nose is tickled right. But I want to mention now a specific book that I read by one David Plouffe. He, along with David Axelrod, were the 2 senior architects of the Obama campaign, and I was curious to hear what they had to say. Admittedly, partly because David seems like a good political name. See, I wasn't quite sold on Shaz yet. I still was going back to David. Einstein quote, "A problem formed by an intelligence cannot be solved by the same intelligence. The answers to our weak democracy are going to come from an alternative political spectrum." This original run is going to be on a donation basis to generate the cash needed to float the rest of my CA trip, $20,000. Call it initial public offering or seeking of angel investors. You can give based on the level of agreement we have, like a rating system. So 100% is $10, 50% is $5, etc. And for those of you who would like to give negative ratings, the check is in the mail. Close with a questionnaire, then answer and comment in the following chapter. So if you're really idealistic, it's hard for you to ask for stuff. Well, idealistic and stubborn means it's hard for you to ask for money. So that seems to be my issue before I had money, that I was superstitious of it. Now it's like, this whole year was just me checking my own brain. But at the beginning of the year, I was like, I made fucking $500,000 in real estate. I should be able to do it in publishing. I had a corporation in real estate. I should be able to do it in publishing. Back of the envelope math checks out. So I'm not too worried about the money. And I'm going to approach it a more standard form. I'll do that internet fundraising bullshit that everyone's doing now. Like 8 years after that, everyone's on the Patreon, everyone's on the other shit. So like, I'll do that. Those will be lanes that I'll have. It'll be only now easier than back then. Back then, I think I was at the head of the curve. If I started podcasting, I might have the readership that a fucking bro fuckface is doing. If I was like starting to ask people for money and stuff, I'd probably like have a platform by now. But it's okay. Those ideas I thought were half-baked. The idea I have right now might be half-baked, but it's further along than back then. And then also I have a different business philosophy. After making money, what I consider decent money, so I have that tax return up there. So the last one I filed was 170. I'm not so superstitious about it. So it's good to practice, and I tell other people too, the first time you get money, it's going to go through your hands probably. Practice spending it before you practice holding on to it, because even if you save all your pennies, then you might be superstitious too. So ball out, do some shit for yourself that you always promised you would do. I did that. Get yourself a fucking materialistic girlfriend. Go to some nice places. Go to some nice parties. Smoke as much weed as you want to. Do the fucking things you wanted to do when you were poor. But it's also an intoxicant. So this whole last year was correcting that side too. I loved my lifestyle. When I got that eviction notice, I had a drop in my stomach, and I haven't felt that except for a couple breakups in my life. Like, am I making the right decision? Like, that attachment to material possessions is a real thing. And I didn't have many material possessions I was attached to, so it's not a possession, but the apartment was my possession. That lifestyle. I could just fucking go into the village and be like, you want to go back to my apartment? The roof is pretty fucking dope. That's how I got the dancer girl. It's like, first date, we didn't even fucking leave the apartment. We were supposed to go to a party that I bought us tickets for, one of these fancy parties. But we just drank on my roof looking at the moon, because it's a fucking rooftop apartment in the fucking West Village overlooking 6th Avenue. Right around the corner from the Comedy Cellars. Taylor Swift, when she was renovating her Tribeca apartment, lived 2 blocks away from me. I didn't have a Taylor Swift apartment, but I lived in a Taylor Swift neighborhood. That's why she's on my short list of fucking Twitter boos. She my Twitter boo, because we could do some New York shit together. And I think she's like an alpha fucker. She's looking for the dude to give her some experience and some fucking songwriting. Oh, and that's another thing. She some of her songs are catchy. So like we'd actually forget sexualizing the relationship, but what if we made some fucking little melodies and music together? I might be a muse of sorts. We might be mutual muses. Shaz, why do you gotta? There's no excuse for me to make fun of anyone or criticize anyone. Let me make my peace with everyone I've criticized, celebrity or otherwise, in these last couple minutes of this video, since I feel like I've outgrown that writing, but that writing is going to be an inspiration for future writing. And now that I accumulate more and more pieces of my personality, I start to mellow out and be like, all right, I'm cool. I mean, I'm cool with myself. Not that I'm cool like I'm better than anyone else, or I'm cool like I'm like cool in that sense, like cool like awesome. I mean like cool like I'm chill, like I'm good. I'm fucking, all these different aspects make up my total complex character. I'm not a fucking I'm not chasing skirts all my life, but that is a big aspect of my personality. I even admitted earlier, like all of this is me saying I'm a writer, and then I'm starting to come to terms. Now I'm more of a political philosopher, critic, social critic. The writing will come, but if it was gonna come, it would have come. Like, what I come back to when I was two bag Shaz walking around New York, I wasn't writing. That's what it is. When I started allowing my whole life to fall apart and just hit all the lower branches, I never stopped thinking about politics. But at a certain point, I stopped. At that point, 2018, I've just been thinking haikus, and whenever I was writing, it was usually coming out in 17 syllable form and shit. These little, I have like fucking a couple hundred, like 300, 400 of them now. But that's next year's work to go through those. But but yeah, that stopped when my life got hard. But I never stopped thinking about society, and that's why I was on the street, and that's why I was bumming around. So that stuff, when what sticks in your head despite all of your adversity is probably the true passion. And despite all of the adversity around me, I still question and get mad at authority and the societies in which we live. That's the initial thing that bugs me. So I'm like a political beast before I'm an artistic beast. And then that's how I organize this 6-color concept in order to run for office and also organize my head and my mind. Is that at first you have the blue, which is the animalistic, the pure fucking antagonistic nature is like trying to kill you, like survival. And then you go to the purple where you have a little bit of space through technology or through expertise to make a shelter, to think some higher thoughts. And after you have that, you have the red, which is pleasure. Now we indulge in ourselves and we enjoy the comfort that we've earned through the purple when we escape from the blue. After that, we have the yellow. Not just indulgence, but you get older. What I experienced in real estate, the joy of executing a company. Like I had money, but I got joy out of making money. And that's a different type of joy. It's like a competitive joy, which is a natural part of man, I think, to have a trade that you excel at. I had 5 years, I was starting to become a journeyman in real estate. I think around 10 years, you start to become a master. That's my own personal. You could get a black belt in 10 years. Like 10 years at a trade, or they say like what, 10,000 hours or something, whatever. That might be another level of expertise, but like, but then above the orange, above that competitive desire to have a trade, which is beyond just enjoying yourself and having space to finally fucking breathe. And then you have like that competitive fulfillment through your trade. Then I think you get the wisdom of the other, and that's where like the psychedelics or the love or like, because the orange, the fourth one up, would be the competition, but that fuels the ego. And so to balance that out, you have the yellow in my system of thought, of personality and stuff, which sort of, as if you have the ego as the gas, then the dissolving of the ego and the humility is the brake. And that's where like the good woman tells you, in my experience, like, you work too much. You need to live a little bit. But it's not indulgence in the red, like the one lower one, which is the childlike indulgence. It's a higher form of communion that like, money is not everything, even though you're good at making it. Building up your numbers of conquest isn't everything, even though you're a good seductor of the opposite sex or the same sex or both or whatever your thing is. Making a connection with the person, a higher quality over quantity, is that wisdom. Higher level connection. Even the wisdom of gaining experience. Don't just do things for the experience just to say that you have that cool Instagram story. Like, are we really learning from the things that we go through? And then the one above that is the green one, and that's the peace. That's the wisdom of silence, the wisdom of the personal path, and the idea that your death, you just return back to the fabric of life itself. There's nothing to fear, because you're born whole, and then you'll return back into the miracle of creation, back into the universe. You're just the universe expressing itself, and that's a really nice piece to have. And that's a nice armor to wear as we go through what sometimes is an irrational world. The fact that man is formed by nature to bear everything that he has to withstand, that's the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. Like, all of these things go back to the same source, is that nothing should really, being chill is a pretty good way to approach life. But this chillness comes from the reflection, and the more I reflect upon my life, and all of this other times that I've spent reflecting on my life, the more I'm compounding it. I explained it to someone earlier this year. Folding the dough, let it set, it'll rise. And then we knead it again, and we let it sit. So kneading, folding the dough back on itself, kneading it, letting it set, and then it's going to rise. All these videos are going to rise, and I don't think I'm going to watch them until towards the end of 2019. But I still have to make them. This was a good one. There's a lot of good in that. There's more good in that than bad. And I thought it was going to be the other way around. So now time to fold some more dough and let it rest.